Good evening or morning, wherever you are. My name is Orville Gibson, and I'm listening to Craig Wessels on A Yank on the Footy, and you should listen too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 94 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I am glad that you're listening. Don't forget that you can find everything related to the podcast at the new website, yankonthefooty.com. I hope you'll consider checking it out. Remember, you can leave me a voicemail. You can share your views on an issue from a previous episode or ask a question there. You can check out my blog posts. And you can also check out all of the episodes from the podcast as well. You can get on the mailing list there as well. Also, if you'd like to help out the show, consider checking out the Buy Me a Coffee page, which you can find on the website. Also, if you're interested in any podcast gear, check out my Redbubble page, which you will find linked up at the stop. And also, if you've got a local footy club and or you're a fan of another, VFL, Sandville club, that sort of thing, and you got a sticker for your club laying around that needs a good home, I'm in the process of decorating the front of my desk. It's more of a drafting table in my classroom. You can find my mailing address in the show notes if you're so inclined to do that. That'd be terrifically appreciated. I do want to encourage each of you to consider signing up for the mailing list for the podcast. You can do that up on the website as well. Whenever a new episode comes out, you get it first. I do publish it. I get the publishing link for that, and then I send it directly out to the people on the email list so they have it before everybody else does. I'd also hope that you'll consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. This one and the next interview episode especially, I think, are going to be very entertaining. I'm so excited to be bringing this one to you. Okay. Now, today's club of the episode is the St. George Dragons Club. They are the only Premier Division club in the south of Sydney, and they've proudly represented and played at the highest level of the AFL Sydney competition since 1928. They play their home games at Olds Park in Penhurst, south of the Central Business District, and they field 4 men's teams from the Premier's Division down to their Masters team, along with 3 women's teams from the Senior Division 1s, their under-19s, and the reserves. They're back in action on the 19th of June, beginning at 11 o'clock against the Pennant Hill Demons on the Mike Keeney Oval at Greenway Park. And best of luck to the Dragons as you head into your next round and throughout the rest of your fixture this year. You can find more information about them at stgeorge.com.au or on their Instagram page, and I'll have links to both of those on the show notes. So best of luck to you as you go forward here in your fixture. Now, folks, I hope you'll sit back and enjoy this conversation between myself and somebody who I've never met in person, but as you're going to hear in the introduction, somebody I most definitely consider a friend. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines the word hero as a person who is admired for having done something very brave or having achieved something very great. I think the Cambridge definition describes this gentleman very well. And over the next couple of episodes, the interview that I conducted with Orville, I think that you might just come to agree with me on this use of the word. So sit back and enjoy this. It was a fun conversation. Do we meander a little bit? Sure we do. But this is, a couple of friends just talking, and I decided to go ahead and get it recorded. We did have some definite avenues that we were traveling down to get through our discussion. We certainly had mileposts that we wanted to address. We do talk some footy, but we get into all sorts of other things that I've never explored on the podcast before, and I could arguably say that Orville might even admit this himself, that he's one of the most unassuming, complex people that you're going to meet. Somebody who you would look at and say, looks like a nice older gentleman, Looks like he could play Santa Claus at the local shopping mall around Christmas time. But there's a lot of stuff going on in this gentleman's life. An absolutely fascinating individual. Stories that you're not going to believe, and I want to just be able to blurt them out to you right now and tell you all about them. But that's what we did the interview for. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to let me talk. A couple of weeks ago when we did this interview, very excited to bring this to you. So enjoy it, and I think this is one you're probably going to want to share with your friends and make sure that they hear about this great guy as well. So enjoy it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by my guest today. This gentleman is someone, quite frankly, whom I have to say I've talked with over the last few years more so than I have my neighbors. I know I've spoken to him more than my neighbor that lives to the north of me, and I never see the neighbor that lives to the south of me. I'm still convinced he's a CIA agent. He only shows up to mow his grass, and then he's never around other than that. Um, Coming to us live from Russell Island, which is about 15 miles southeast of the center of Brisbane, I'd like to welcome to my guest, and I think I can safely say my friend, Orville Gibson, to the podcast. Orville, thanks for coming on, sir. An absolute pleasure to finally put some of our discussions in digital format where other people can hear them.
I'm delighted to be here, Craig. It's as you say, it's been quite a few years. We've been chatting back and forth. I met you on the Cats fan page on Facebook.
Yeah,
and yeah, we struck it off. We're both ex-servicemen.
Yeah, you're one of those people that welcomed me into being a cat supporter, and I can't be thankful enough for that, because it's been a great. I'm wearing my cat's hat right now, but I'm going to take my hat off for now because it's getting a little toasty in the house because I've got the windows all shut up because it's getting ready to rain here.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm delighted that we're able to do this tonight. I put together some some questions about some of the things we've talked about before that other people had not heard about. But I wanted to dive in here as we get going. And first of all, you live on Russell Island, and tell us about a typical day on Russell Island, because I imagine it has to be a little bit slower than being on the mainland.
It's virtually a retirement colony. Just about everybody here is retired. There is a school here. It's got a capacity of 300 students, but there's only about 100 that go there, and it's chosen by a lot of people simply because it's a good retirement spot. It has a bowls club, and the fishing here is fantastic. And it's not your typical tropical island with palm trees and coconuts and things like the white sand. The island is completely surrounded by mangrove swamps, and that's what makes it such a good fishing spot.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The island itself is probably it's about 16 miles long and about 8 miles wide. So it's
pretty good size.
Probably Brisbane's biggest suburb. It's Brisbane's biggest suburb, I think.
So how many people live on the island?
But the people here, about 6,000.
Okay, so about 6,000 live there.
But they're scattered in like there's little colonies. Yep.
Okay.
But apart from the centre of the island, where all the commercial area is, with the supermarket and the post office and everything, all the people are scattered through the bush. Most of the island is still bush, and they're sort of camped out in colonies.
Okay.
There'd be 20 houses in one group and 10 houses in another group. And that geography is all the way down the island. But it's an excellent place to retire.
Yeah. So how often do you find yourself going off of the island?
Probably once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
No real need to go off the island for anything.
Okay.
We've got a medical centre here with 3 doctors. We've got a couple of cafes. You can have a nice lunch or just a burger or something if you want. There's not much in the way of takeaway food here. We did have a Chinese restaurant, but it closed down. And apart from that, I don't really have a need to go across to the mainland. We've
Okay.
got a return services club here, and you can have a meal at the RSL
Yeah.
and the bowls club, and there's really no need to go across. But every 2 or 3 weeks, I do go over. I go and visit my mother. She's in a nursing home over on the mainland, so
Okay.
uh, that's probably my major reason for going to the mainland, is to visit her. Apart from that, we're pretty well self-sufficient here. We don't need to leave the island for anything. We've got a gas station, so you can buy petrol here. Um,
Well, and as you
and
said,
it's just
it's
it's a
about
place to
8 miles
retire.
by 60 miles. It's a big island, so you do need to
Yeah,
have a gas station there.
yeah. There's 4 islands in our archipelago. There's actually 15 islands here,
Okay.
but there's only 4 that people live on. Um, they There's shops on the other islands. So if I need something, like there's a butcher shop on the next island over,
Okay.
Maclay
Okay.
Island, but there's no butcher shop here. So if I want something a bit unusual from the butcher, like a duck or
Yeah.
something like that, I have to nip over to the next island. But catching the ferry between the islands is free,
Okay.
and uh, the government used to charge people for going back and forth between the islands, but then
Hmm.
we all jacked up and said, no, look, this is really, the ferry is our road. Uh,
Right.
so the government cut out fares for the inter-island travel. We do have to pay to go back to the mainland, but it's not very much. It's a 12-kilometre trip from our ferry dock here on the island across to the mainland ferry dock. It's
Okay.
12 kilometres, takes about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And the ferries run from 4 in the morning, I think, is the first one, and the last one is about 11:30 at night.
Okay. Because I
They
know
run
you've
about every half hour or so during the day, and I think there's a gap of an hour to the last one at night.
okay. Because I remember that, if I'm not mistaken, there was one instance that you told me where you got stuck on the mainland and you had to stay on the mainland overnight because you missed the last boat, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. I went to a football game
Oh,
down the
good
Gold Coast.
good reason to miss.
Yeah, I went to watch the Suns at Metricon,
Hmm.
and I got stuck in traffic on the M1 coming back, and I didn't get back in time for the last ferry, so I had to sleep in the car. But that's a small inconvenience.
Yeah. So have you found people that have retired to the island and maybe felt like it just wasn't for them and then they left?
Not so much people retire. When people retire here, they buy a place,
Okay.
and it's you've virtually got to wait for someone else to retire to sell it if you want to leave. But there's a lot of people sort of come over here and stay for a while because the rental here is quite cheap
Okay.
compared to the mainland. It's probably only about half the cost of a place on the mainland. So there's a lot of young families that are either building a deposit for a house on the mainland or something. They come here for the cheaper rent,
Okay.
and that's about our only traffic in and out of the renters. But
Okay.
the older folks like me, they come here and they settle down. They put down roots and they build houses, and it's the island will never fill up. It's
Oh,
uh, it's too big. It's quite a big island. They've been talking for about 40 years now about putting a bridge across to the mainland from the southern tip of the island, but
uh-huh.
I don't think that'll happen in my next lifetime. it's,
And
the
let's
locals don't want it.
I was going to say, let's say that was going to be built in 2022. Would that be something you'd be pushing against having happen?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
None of the people that live here want the bridge.
Okay.
I haven't spoken to anyone here that wants the bridge.
Well, that kind of makes sense because a lot of people who make the decision to live on an island make that decision for a reason. It's a conscious
Yes,
decision that they've made that they want to kind of break that umbilical cord, if you will, with the mainland to have maybe a little bit slower life than what they've got
that's
in the
exactly
big
right.
city. We've got, I
Yeah,
live on the southern coast of Lake Erie, and we have a couple of islands about 5 or 6 miles out into the lake that are habitable. You've got a handful of people that live on both of them year round, but the summertime they are just absolutely filled with tourists because boating is huge around here, and
right.
you have a lot of, one island is a lot more slow paced, and the other one has turned into kind of a resort area with lots of bars and restaurants, and just a lot of people going there and consuming significant amounts of alcohol. So
Yeah,
yeah, but it's and I know you've told me that when you're there that you've actually ended conversations with me before because you've said I have to go catch dinner now, and you head down to the pier to go
yeah,
catch a fish to eat for dinner. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and it's a pretty
It's
evidently
like that.
it's a pretty easy thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. You only got to throw a line in the water and a fish will jump on the end of it for you.
And they're that plentiful there, so it doesn't take you that long.
No, no.
Wow.
uh, I
Wow.
think the longest I've ever waited to hook my dinner was about 15 minutes.
Huh.
And you can go down. You can go if you like squid, and I do.
Hmm.
You can go down there anytime during the night, and there'll be squid there that'll jump straight on.
Wow.
You no waiting. You just put your lure down,
Yeah.
and you'll feel them wrap themselves around the lure, and you just pull them out.
No, I would have.
It's really plentiful. This is a marine national park.
Okay.
The southern end of well, the entirety of Moreton Bay is an enormous national park,
Okay.
and during any time of the year, like there's very strict catch limits for fish,
Hmm.
um, so that it keeps the conservation value
Right. Right.
of the national park going. And the during winter, and we're just about to have them now. The whales arrive,
Okay.
and that's a big tourist draw. The humpback whales are on their migration now from Antarctica, and they've just passed Sydney, and they'll be here in a week or so. And that creates a lot of tourism,
I
but all
bet.
that tourism is linked to the mainland.
Uh
Like
huh.
the boats go out and take people out to see the whales,
Yeah.
but it's all done from the mainland. We don't actually have whale tours from the island, but the whales do come down as far as where I live.
Okay.
Last year they were in the channel here behind the house. I was only 200 meters offshore,
Wow.
and
Wow.
there were whales jumping out of the water there. They jump like dolphins, and
Holy mackerel.
it's pretty spec. It gets pretty spectacular here, and sometimes the orcas come up pretty close to the jetty where the ferry pulls up, and the bay is full of dolphins.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just a beautiful
Now,
place to
now,
live.
do a lot of people that live on the island? Do a lot of people have their own boats?
Yes,
Okay.
yep,
Okay.
but they're only for like fishing. Nobody. There might be two people that actually commute to the mainland and back in their own boat.
Okay.
It's it's too expensive for fuel these days.
Yeah.
Everybody uses the ferry. It's only $4 to go across to the mainland.
Right. But I didn't know if they had any that were just like for pleasure craft, if they wanted to just go out and just go buzzing around the harbor, or go out into the ocean itself, away from the harbor, that sort of thing. Because that's there's a lot of people here that that will have 25, 30, 35 foot long boats that they'll take wherever. I mean, I had a friend when I was growing up that they
Yeah,
had about a 45-foot boat that they would take. They would go on vacation and they would travel all through the Great Lakes on the boat. Yeah, and it was
right.
that was how they
Yeah,
traveled.
yeah. There's a lot of that here. There's a lot of boats moored down near the ferry dock, and they go up. There's 40, 50 footers down there. Some of them, but
Okay.
everybody virtually has a boat.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just get a little aluminium boat and a
Uh-huh.
little outboard motor, and they use that just to go out. the islands are in a group,
Hmm.
and there's good fishing and excellent crabs. I've got to tell you about the crabs. Uh, great big mud crabs, great big mud crabs here that have got a claw as big as your hand. It's
Wow. I am
yeah. So
I'm a
there's a
big
lot of.
fan of crab.
Are you?
I am a big crab fan. I'm looking at some pictures of one here on my screen here, and there's a gentleman here that has a huge one in his hands here. Those are massive. Wow. You need a hammer to
Yeah, they're
crack.
very big crab.
Yeah.
They can get pretty angry too.
Well, that's why you have the pot of boiling water ready to go for them.
Yeah,
Yep.
on the away from the little archipelago of sand islands here in the southern end of the bay, there's two enormous sand islands to my immediate east, and there's another one further north, Morton Island and North Stradbroke Island, uh, that are just enormous. I think Morton Island's 40 miles long, and North Stradbroke would probably be around about the same, but not as wide. And there's a lot of tourist activity over there, particularly with off-road vehicles,
Hmm.
people going camping, and they provide us with the protection so that we don't get any of the action of the sea.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking. You guys are. Yeah. I'm just pulling up the map here because you've got that. Looks like was it North Stradbroke Island pretty much blocks you in, so you're not getting a lot of that.
Yeah,
Lot of the weather
yeah.
there. So
I could swim. I could swim across to North Stradbroke from my house,
except for the orcas.
except for the orcas. The orcas are actually fairly friendly. I've I don't know why they call them killer whales. There's no actual record of them ever having killed anybody.
Well,
But
I I have watched a pod of killer whales eviscerate a sea lion in Alaska. I saw it with my own eyes. So they can get
right,
aggressive.
yeah, yeah, they seem to like humans, and the biggest worry in the bay are the sharks.
Well,
We have there's some very big sharks here, particularly tiger sharks and bull sharks,
both of them are very
and
aggressive, from if I remember correctly.
oh, very very aggressive. There's people here on the island that have got bite marks in their boat from the bull sharks.
Hmm.
The tiger sharks will sort of keep their distance a bit, but the bull sharks will just come up. They'll bite your outboard motor. They'll bite your boat.
Wow.
Uh, they're really aggressive, and they can get very very big.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And those actually, if I'm not mistaken, the bull sharks actually can live in freshwater as well.
they can,
Yeah.
yes,
So
yep.
that's that
They
definitely.
speared one up at Ipswich. If you have a look at your map and see where Ipswich is, it's right up at the headwaters of the Brisbane River. And there was a bull shark up there, and it was that big they had to send rangers up there to try and catch the damn thing. They just
Hmm.
wanted to move it back to salt water, but it was putting up such a fight. They ended up having to spear it to kill it,
Wow.
and it was as just below the dam wall.
Okay.
There was a weir across above the weir is freshwater, and below the weir is brackish, and this shark was in the brackish water,
Hmm.
right up virtually as far as you can go up the Brisbane River. So
Unbelievable. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not a big fan of those critters. I don't mind looking at pictures of them, but I don't need to see them up close and
yeah.
personal. Yeah.
No, I've been diving in the bay a few times, and I've spotted a few tiger sharks, and a few of them have been quite big. Fortunately, I haven't run into any bull sharks, but there was a woman taken at North Stradbroke Island probably about 3 years ago, and they
Wow.
didn't recover very much of the poor woman.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it virtually bit her in half. So yeah,
that's
bull shark looks its teeth. The tooth structure of a bull shark is very similar to the great white.
yeah.
Yeah, and they can get
They've got
that
a lot
mouth
of them.
open an
Yeah.
awful long way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's Okay. Enough shark talk. Let's
Yeah.
talk. Let's get into some. Yeah, we've gotten enough into sharks here, and hopefully we're not tuning out too many people here who are not shark, are not shark fans, that sort of thing, who don't like the water. So, you know,
Right.
you had an interesting story about how you became a cat supporter, because you as you mentioned earlier, you befriended me in one of the cats discussion boards on Facebook, and you had a roundabout way to becoming a cat supporter, because you're not from the Geelong area.
No, no,
Why don't you tell us how you became a cat
I had
supporter?
joined. I joined the army in 1972, and at one point, my wife and I had two children. We were about to have a third, and I wasn't sure whether the army was where I wanted my career to continue. And I took a year off from the army, and
Can I ask you something really
of course you
quickly
can.
about that before we go any further?
Yeah, yep.
Having been in the military here, how does that work, where they just simply say, go ahead and take a year off? Is it, how does, do people actually come back?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
quite often.
Okay.
Some people. It depends on why people leave. Some
Okay.
people leave to study. Some people leave to travel. Some people leave for family commitments. That's what
Okay.
it was in my case.
Okay.
I wanted to be away from the army to make that decision as whether I
Okay.
wanted to stay on, and I did in the end. But all you have to do in the Australian Army is fill out a leave application for unpaid leave for up to a year,
Okay.
and once it's approved, you just take your uniform off and go and do other things. And that's pretty much what I did. And my wife came from Victoria, and I we went back down there. I didn't want to live around her area. It's a country area. There's not much work around, so we went to Melbourne, and we
And you said you
set up
enjoyed your
house
time.
there.
You
And
said you enjoyed your time in Melbourne when you were there.
yeah, yeah, except for the weather.
Yeah. Yeah. You had a great line
It
about that.
was, yeah. I was there from January to August, and it was the longest 5 years of my life.
Well, you should come see the weather here in Ohio in the wintertime, when it's
Oh no, thanks.
-6 Fahrenheit and 30-mile-an-hour winds and 8 inches of snow on the ground.
Yeah, I have been to the Himalaya. I walked up to Mount Everest, and I walked around the Annapurna circuit,
So you've
and
seen,
we had
yes.
days there where we had days there it was -20
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Celsius, and I didn't enjoy it at all, Craig. I've got
I
to tell
bet.
you, I'm no
I
fan
bet.
of snow.
Yeah. I'm getting to that point. So I'm
uh,
getting to that point. So you found yourself in Melbourne.
yeah, and I started work with a trucking company there, and they hauled Geelong cement, just the dry powder, in tankers, and we used to have to pick up that Geelong cement, even other parts of Australia aren't aware that Geelong is an enormous industrial area for the manufacture of dry cement powder. And
Okay.
they have a depot in North Melbourne, uh, and my first day on the job at the trucking company, I went down there to fill the tanker up, and the little chappie that operates the filling station there, where they just dump this stuff into the tanker. He said, "What footy club do you follow?" And I said, "Oh, I follow Manly Warringah." And he said, "No, that's the bum sniffers." He said, "I'm talking about real football." And I'd had some experience. I played a year before I joined the army. I played a year of Australian football, and in the army, I played 2 years of Australian football. So that was my only exposure to it. But I'd never actually had a loyalty to a club. And the little guy, his name's Alf, and he said, "Oh, you need to follow Geelong." He said, and he gave me the spiel. He said, "Oh, look, they're the best team, and they've got all these players, and he's starting to rattle off the names of the players that I can't even remember now. It's but he gave me the full spiel on Geelong, and just from that, every time I went into the depot,
Mm-hmm.
he'd tell me something new about Geelong, or tell me how they're going at training because the season hadn't started.
Right, right.
Yeah, I ended up going to a couple of Cats games while I was down there, and yeah, just sort of fell into the Cats fold.
So, and you're
So
glad you did, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now, did you ever?
Everybody's got to have a footy team.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance? Once you figured out that okay, I'm good with this, did you ever thank him for recommending them?
I left Melbourne just before the grand finals, so
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. I can't remember if the Cats played that year, but it was.
That would have been what, like
I
70,
ended up.
74,
was able to.
75?
Yeah, 70.
Okay.
Yeah, the end of 70. Yeah, 75. 75.
Okay.
I was down there. That's right. And
Okay.
but I'd sort of picked up on the Cats by then, and whenever I went into the depot, I was able to have a conversation with him about them, and I'd become a fan almost by accident.
Well, and you've seen him play a few times. So what's your great? First of all, I have to ask you because you said you played for a couple of years while you were in the Army, and a year before that, were you any good?
Yep. They couldn't keep me in a position, Craig.
Yeah. So
I
so kind of like
yeah,
Jordan Clark.
the first time that I ran out, the coach, I'd never played the game, and I knew none of the rules. I joined because a friend of mine from South Australia was in the club, and he'd got me into it. And first time I ran out, I was in the back pocket.
Okay.
And he said, "Well, we'll alternate you with Rover," because he said, I don't know how you're going to play. I said, "Okay." So they put me in the back pocket. The first time I got my hands on the ball, I was way down near the opposite end goalposts. I went the length of the field, Craig.
You didn't bounce the ball once, did you?
I kept kick. I knew that it had to be bounced, but
Yeah.
I didn't. So what I did was, when I came to a defender, I'd do a little chip kick over the top,
Okay.
like they do in rugby league.
Okay.
That's
So
the only tactic I had.
So that worked out well for you then.
I scored 3 goals
In your first game?
I scored 3 goals that day
From the back pocket?
in my first game. From the back pocket.
So was that the only game you played back there? Or did they?
No, I played other games.
Okay.
Yeah, and they taught me how to bounce the ball because they knew I was kicking over the top. But I did it pretty well. Because from the rugby experience, I knew kicking into empty space was a valuable tool, because the opponent had to then turn around and chase.
Mm-hmm.
So by that time, you've usually got hold of the ball again, and it was a good tactic, and it worked 3 times.
So what is your as a Cat supporter, what's your greatest memory as a Cat supporter?
Oh, geez, anything to do with Gary Ablett, anything to do with either of the Gary Ablets. His father was a great stalwart of the club too. And during, geez, I can't remember the year. It was one year that Gary Ablett Senior kicked, I think it was 7 goals in the grand final.
Wow.
And and we still lost.
Yeah.
Actually, the Cats didn't win a grand final from 1961 to 2007.
Kind of like the Tigers did up until they won theirs recently.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a long time between drinks.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you're and I've watched some highlights of Gary Ablett. I've watched Gary Ablett Senior. I watched a couple games that he's played in. I was able to watch the last few years of Junior's career. And even the couple of years that he was with still with Gold Coast when I first started watching the game. And it's just they were both phenomenal players. They were a different type of players, most certainly. From what
they weren't their style of play wasn't anything similar. But uh, Gary Jr., I think he actually learned a lot from his time at the Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm.
I think he picked up quite a lot from his time there. And but Gary Senior he was just phenomenal. He was evasive. He was fast. He was accurate with the ball in his hand. He'd kick it where he wanted it to go. And he was probably, oh, I can't split them really. I was going to say he's probably the best player I've ever seen, but I don't know. Gary Jr. was just the same. So
Yeah, he's one of the better ones that I've seen play, and it's
yeah,
and that, and this pains me to say this, being as old as I am, at his advanced age.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, his best years were his last.
yeah.
From about 30 onwards, he could just read the game. He knew exactly what was going to happen, and he could position himself to be there. To take a pass, take a handball, or do an offload, or lay a tackle. He was reading the game probably better than anyone I've ever seen.
Yeah,
He
that
was a great reader of the game.
it is. Yeah, I've been very impressed with him, and I it just everything that I'd seen. He looked to have been a terrific teammate as well, and just it sound from everything I've also heard, just seems to be one of the nicest people in the world as well.
He only got one suspension in his whole career.
Yeah.
He got a week for a high tackle, I think it was, and there was a lot of debate about whether it was really an intentional high tackle or whether he just coat hung a bloke that was already falling over. But that was his only suspension.
So
He
so
got
that
one suspension.
that didn't happen when he was playing for Gold Coast and he possibly tried to tackle Joel Selwood, was it?
No, it was in the no, he was back in the Geelong colours by then.
Okay.
It was after he came back from the coast, and I think it may have
No,
been
I do
either
remember him getting suspended a week. Yeah.
his last year or his second last year. It was one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was. Yeah. It's
but he
not
had a
like.
great playing record. He was always a fair player. You got to say that about him.
So you've kind of answered part of one of my questions for you. So you only, I was going to ask you who were the three greatest players you've ever seen play, and you've kind of alluded to two of them. So who would the third one be? Yeah. So who's the best?
Alex Jezelenko from the Blues, and Dippier Di Domenico
Okay.
also. Uh, that's a real mouthful. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
everyone just called him
Dippo.
Dipper. I'm
Yeah.
not actually Dipper.
Yeah.
It was a hyphenated name, and it was about a foot long.
Yeah.
But
I think
yeah,
it's like,
Dippier Domenico was one of the greats.
and he was with Hawthorne.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
was Dipper one? No. And the other one that I'd have to say would be Lee Matthews.
Okay.
Yeah, he ended up as the coach at Brisbane, but he kicked the ball that hard once, Craig. It broke the behind post in half.
Holy mackerel! And I've seen people run into those and they've not broken. But
Yeah,
it must have
and
been very high up on the post though that it hit.
it did hit a high up, but
Okay.
it snapped the post exactly halfway up.
Wow.
I'm just trying to think what ground that was at. I think it was at Windy Hill, Essendon ground, and it's quite fun. You can actually find footage of that on YouTube.
Okay.
The day Lee Matthews broke the post.
I'll
But
have
yeah,
to look. I'll have to look for that.
those three, Lee Matthews, Dippier Domenico, and Alex Jezelenko.
You
Uh,
beauty.
the Jezelenko won the grand final with a kick,
Yeah.
and the ball was already in flight, and the siren went, and he kicked it 70 meters,
Wow.
and it went straight through the middle. It was just a unbelievable kick. But yeah, those three stick out for me.
So what's the most heartbreaking footy moment you've ever seen? What's the thing that that just left you like bummed out or just Just sad.
Last year's grand final.
Okay, we can end the interview right now because I agree with you. That's been the well, you know, I
It'd be a tie with when they lost to St Kilda. I was pretty heartbroken
yeah
too. Uh,
because
they were
I
having a real purple patch,
mhm.
and they were either in the grand final and won it, or in the grand final and just lost for about 4 or 5 years, and it was just heartbreaking because everyone wanted someone
Mhm.
to get more than 3 in a row, and the Pies have got close, Cats have got close, but nobody has ever won 3 grand finals on the trot. And I'm thinking that's what
Didn't Hawthorn? I thought they did.
I don't think Hawthorn did. I'd have to go back into my history
Okay.
books to look, but I don't think they actually won 3.
Okay.
Uh,
I know it was close to that, but yeah. So do you get yeah, I know living on the island, you said you missed a boat coming back from Gold Coast. Do you get to a lot of games now? I mean, do you go watch the Suns and the Lions play just because you're somewhat close?
I'm actually closer to Brisbane than I am to the Gold Coast, although
Mm-hmm.
as the crow flies, I'm not very far from Metricon Stadium. It's a lot closer than the Gabba for me, but
But it's a little
I don't.
inconvenient to get there.
Yeah, I don't go to a lot of games. I love to go and watch the Lions and the Cats play at the
Mm-hmm.
Gabba, and I get down to Metricon when there's an interesting team. I went and watched the Gold Coast and Carlton last year.
Okay.
Uh, I had an interest. I actually wanted to see Paddy Cripps play, uh, and sort of make an assessment of the guy actually on there, where I don't have to take my eyes off, where the camera's not following the action,
Right,
where
right.
I can just sort of see what he's doing when he's got the ball and what he's doing when he hasn't got the ball. And sometimes I just do that. I'll go down and watch a game at the Gold Coast, or I'll go to the Lions game. But it's just to watch a particular player if it's not
Okay.
the Cats.
Okay. That's kind
Yeah,
of cool. Yeah, that's one thing I would love to see is and I've talked about this with some other people on um episodes and discussions, and and you're an NFL fan as well, which we'll kind of touch on that here in a minute, but
yeah,
I don't know if you've ever seen the cameras like from the end zone where you can see all 22 players.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. I absolutely love it when just even for a few moments they put the camera, they show the view from the camera that's up above the goalposts. So I
Yeah,
because never having been to a ground before to watch a game in person, I love being able to see how the field opens up because you can't really tell the distance between the players when you're watching it from the camera on the sideline. I love seeing the
right.
game open up where I can see where everybody's going and how
Where
the
everybody
attack
is.
begins. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really
yeah.
neat thing to be able to see.
I wish they'd introduced. They did in rugby here. We have a thing called a spider cam, and it's a camera that's suspended above the ground
Mm-hmm.
on 4 cables. And by driving the 4 cables, they can move the camera around, and that gives you a pretty good view. But I actually think that they'd be better off now with a drone.
Yeah, they might be actually.
They could, if they got a camera drone and flew that around behind the players, around the players, you can see a play developing in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, it's much more surrounding. I think that'd be a great improvement for the television coverage.
Well, and they could even have something like AFL, like they did with the AFLX for a couple of years, where they had the really long goals that were worth 10 points, and maybe if you had a kick and you kick
Yeah,
down the drone, that would be worth 10 points.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be good. Yeah, they still have that 9-point goal in the preseason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Do you think that sort of thing should ever happen in a regular game?
Oh no, I don't think so.
I didn't think you would. I didn't
No,
think you would.
no. There's too many players now that can actually boot a goal from outside the
Yeah.
50,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's becoming fairly commonplace. Hardly a game goes by now where someone doesn't let fly from 50, 60 meters out and pot a goal.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it would make it
Mitch Duncan
it
did it
would
a
make
couple
it
weeks ago.
you could stack your you could stack your team with guys that are good at long distance, uh, and it could alter the score. I like the scoring system the way it is.
Wouldn't that be crazy looking at the statistics of a game where a team wins a goal, wins a game, kicking 15 goals for, and they had 3 inside
Yeah,
50s.
yeah,
Everything was from outside 50 for the game. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. That
Now you turned me on to something a couple of years ago that and I've actually had people ask me about this when I've mentioned it. When you listen to games, because you don't always watch, you sometimes just prefer to listen to the games. And
yes,
you mentioned to me about the NIRS network, the NIRS. Tell us a little bit about that,
yeah.
because I've had people in Australia ask me about it because they'd never heard about it before.
All right. NIRS is the National Indigenous Radio Service. Because in rural communities, uh, AFL is the game, and a lot of the listenership, like NIRS, is an Australia-wide network.
Hmm.
There's an Indigenous radio station within hearing distance, or they can listen over the AFL. And but unfortunately, NIRS don't get quite enough games for mine. But it's very, very big with our Indigenous people here. And one of the good things about NIRS is they have very, very few ads, and all of their commentary team are former players.
Okay.
There's no like professional sports journalists in there or anything, and they're all former players. They might not all be Indigenous former players, but they are all former for, football players.
Yeah, I've
And
listened to several games on there, and they are very entertaining.
yeah, and they do a good half quarter time analysis. They have a catch up at the end of the game where they sort of look back over the game and say this happened because so and so
Okay.
kicked a goal. Or they're really knowledgeable men, and I really enjoy listening to their call. It's I'll listen to them before I listen to the ABC, which I have trouble actually getting here.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
and
you can get any of those through the AFL's website.
yes, I do.
Yeah.
But even even with that, the ABC, which is our national
Hmm.
broadcaster, the ABC falls out from time to time,
Okay.
and it just goes blank. And sometimes for quite a long time, there'll be like a 15-minute silence in a call, and
Huh.
I get that I have to change over. But I've never had that happen with NIRS. Their
Well,
call is continuous. Their commentary is excellent.
well,
They're
you mentioned that they don't get to do many games. So is that something, and that's something I never even thought of. Are they, because what I'm amazed by how many, when I actually do put a game on the radio through the AFL.com.au site, that there's always a list of like 6 or 8 different networks that are broadcasting the game. Are NIRS
yep.
only allowed to broadcast so many games? Is that
Yes,
what's
the AFL
okay?
only give them so many because they don't actually pay for the broadcast rights.
Okay, well that makes okay. I didn't know that.
The ABC and SEN and the AFL Nation and all those,
Mhm.
they all have to actually pay to take the broadcast, but NIRS get it for free.
Okay, I didn't know that, but that makes complete sense then, that they're able to do that and get 3 or 4 games each week as opposed to all 9 of them. That makes sense then. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm glad you clarified that, because I had no idea that how they decided what games they were going to be broadcasting, because I would go and look, and sometimes they would show up on the list and sometimes they wouldn't be there, and I had no idea why
yeah,
they were at one and not at another.
yeah,
So that's actually a good um Good to know that. And one of the neat things about it with them, and I've actually is you can actually send text messages through SMS to them during the course of the game that they'll
Yeah,
read out. And I've actually
yeah,
done that before. You know.
yeah. I've often done it as well, and it's a good way to keep yourself involved with the game.
Hmm.
And they're so knowledgeable. You can even ask them about not specifically the game that's on, but
Right.
you can ask them a question about another game that was on or
Yeah.
one that's coming up.
Right. Right.
Uh, I have a great question session with a fella called Gilbert McAdam, and he's always calling the Lions games. So I'll send them a text and I'll ask them about how they think Tom Lynch is going down at the Tigers,
Uh
or
huh.
just anything at all. And um, Gilbert's a particularly good. He played for the Lions for quite a long time. I think it was 4 or 5 seasons he spent at the Lions, and he
Okay.
knows everybody in the club. He's really knowledgeable about the Lions things. So whenever the Lions games are on, and Nurs have got the call, which just about all the time for some reason here, I'm always on there to ask a question from Gilbert. He's a really, really knowledgeable footballer.
Okay. Um, going back to your, you'd worked with the Geelong Cement for a while there, but you've had a lot of different jobs during the course of your career, and you spent time
Yeah,
in the Army, um, and you told me a story a couple of years ago that it was just fascinating, and it was about during some significant floods that happened back in 1974 during your time in the military, where you
yeah,
actually rescued several people from their home during some horrific flooding, to me that's you may be somebody who sits there and says I was doing my job, but there are six people there that are the people, and I think there were six if I'm not mistaken,
that's right.
that to you they were a hero, that you're a hero,
Yeah,
and they you may not
which I,
think that.
I told you, I told you the full story of that later. That I actually met one of them.
No, well, why don't you tell us about that, because we talked about it off air again today, but go ahead, tell us what happened there, because it's the kind of thing that just we don't hear enough stories of people doing heroic things. We hear a lot of dumb things in the news. We hear a lot of people making mistakes and that sort of thing, but we don't hear enough good stuff like this. So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that's all right. That was during the 1974 floods in Brisbane, which were some of the worst floods that the city has ever had. And Brisbane is built on a coastal plain, so it does tend to flood. And the flooding will go right into the centre of the city at times. But I was one of several people that had been trapped at the army base at Enoggera, and we were most of the place was out. So um, we went to the duty officer and said, "Can we get a vehicle, and me and my mate will just go out and wander around and see if there's people that need help." And blow me down, we hadn't got to the end of Fraser's Road, and it was very late at night. It was about 10 o'clock at night. Fraser's Road is right along one border of the Enoggera Army Base, which is one of the biggest bases in Queensland.
Okay.
And we could see that there's a big stone bridge at the bottom of Fraser's Road, and the bridge was almost under, and there's an enormous crack in the ground. That's the best way to describe it. It's a massive chasm. It's probably 20 meters deep, and it was absolutely full of water. And we went around the corner, and we thought we'll go down. We crossed the bridge and turned left to go down, and there was a lot down in the bottom end of the chasm. There's a lot of houses down there that we knew would be flooded.
Hmm.
but we only got as far as I think it was the second house down the street, and the lights. We were in a Land Rover, and the lights of the Land Rover lit up uh, people sitting on the roof of a house.
Hmm.
And I asked mate, I said, "Can you swim?" And he said, "Not a stroke." He said, "Can you swim?" I said, "Yeah, I'm not bad at it, but I don't know how we're going to get to these people." And he said, "We'll put the pinch chain on around your waist." And he said, "And I'll drive you out on the winch cable." So that's what we did. We anchored the Land Rover with a chain to a telegraph pole,
Okay.
and my mate drove me out because I couldn't. There was no way to do anything other than steer in the current. It was running at about 30 knots. It was a terrible night, and it was belting rain, and it was blowing a gale as well. And he drove me out, and I got the kids off first. Then I went back and I got the mother off, and I got the next. I got the father off, and when he got there, I thought we were finished, and he said, "No," he said, "my next door neighbours are there." He said, "They're on the roof of their house, and he said they've got no way off, and they haven't got anywhere. They didn't have anywhere near the amount of roof space that we had." So my mate drove me back out on the winch cable again, and I climbed up to the roof of the first house where we'd just taken the people off, and I could so there was just enough light from the Land Rover to see to the next house, and I could see these people were they had maybe a foot, and they were gone.
Yeah.
There was a foot of their house was showing above the water,
Wow.
and I thought these people they're in desperate straits, and I just signalled to have more wire, and he was just about to drive me out on the cable, and there was a crack, and I looked up, and the house was gone, and there was I can't remember. I think it was 5 people on the roof of the house, and they were never found.
That's.
Fraser's.
I know you feel bad about not having been able to help them, but there are
Yeah,
six people. There were 6 people that survived because of what you did, and you
yeah.
said you got to meet one of them later on as well.
That's right. I did. Um, the I had remarried after my first wife died. I remarried, and the we had split up. Uh,
Hmm.
this is a short way to put it. And she had remarried again, and we had a daughter together, and I wanted to meet the man who had sort of come into my daughter's life, and
Right. Right. Makes sense.
make an assessment of the guy. And I went over to dinner at their house one night, and I noticed that the guy had a slight English accent.
Hmm.
And I said, "What part of England are you from?" And he told me. And I said, How long have you been here?" And he said, "Oh, we came over in 1974." Uh, 1973 they had arrived. The floods were in January of 73 over the Australia Day long weekend. And he said, "We came over at the end of 1973." And I said, "Geez, you picked a bad time to turn up." I said, that was the year Brisbane was almost underwater."
Yeah.
And then and then he told me, he said, "Yes." He said, our next door neighbours were killed by the floods." And I said, "Oh, where did you live?" And he said, out at Ashgrove, which is where the Inaugural Army base is."
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm sitting there thinking, that couldn't possibly be. And he was much younger than me too, but my second wife was much younger as well. And I said, "How old were you when you came here?" He said, "Oh, I was 11." And
Well,
he said, "I
she
remember the
she was a
floods." He
lot
said,
younger than you.
"Yeah."
She was a
And
lot younger than you then. Okay.
yes, she was. Oh, let me think. She was 22 years younger than me.
Wow.
And anyway, he said, "We lived at Ashgrove." He said, "And behind the house was this enormous crack in the ground." And I'm going, "This couldn't be real." And it was him. He said we thought we were goners. He said, and then out of nowhere, this army Land Rover turned up, and a guy came out on the winch cable and winched the whole family to safety. And he said, and then our next door neighbour's house washed away, and they were never found. And I didn't know what to say. I couldn't very well say, "Oh, that was me."
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you bring up in the, that's the kind of thing you bring up in the conversation where your former wife is thinking, oh, that's how you want to try to get back with me? You're going to go ahead and tell those kinds of stories. Now,
Exactly. Yes.
now, were you able to go ahead? You never
I
told
never
him?
let on to him.
Wow.
No, I never told him, and I never told my daughter either. And I've left a message in my will that tells the whole story. It's in an envelope attached to my will.
Oh man, you
And
know what? Please, I hope they don't listen to this episode.
well, unfortunately, that guy has now died. He had a very bad heart, apparently,
Oh,
and and he died when he was, I think, 43. That's
wow.
quite a few years ago now. And my daughter lives in Germany now.
Okay.
She married a German chappie, and yeah, she lives in the Alps over there. So neither of them are likely to hear the
No,
broadcast. But
I will definitely not reach out to her then. Okay, so that's wow. So that, I mean, yeah, if people don't think that that's heroic, then I don't know what they're thinking then. So
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 if I got there at 12 o'clock, I'd still be waiting.
there you go. So how are you thinking the Cats are looking this year so far from what you've seen?
Patchy. Um, they've had good wins, but I haven't uh, I haven't seen them playing with the confidence that they've had in other years. I'm wondering whether they're missing having Ablett there at the front, because he was always their go-to man.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I describe they're doing okay. I mean, what are they? Fourth on the ladder, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, I think they dropped. I
Um,
think they actually dropped down to
but
sixth. I think with the loss to
sixth,
Sydney. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They could be doing better. Um, and there's obviously some weaknesses there that their opponents are finding. Um, but overall, we're still in the eight,
Right. Right.
and um, while you're in the eight, you're in with a big chance. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what point of the season. So
Yeah.
I think they'll do okay. I don't know. I don't know. The Demons are going to be in the grand final.
You,
That's my prediction now.
okay. Okay.
The
And
Demons,
go ahead.
they're going to be there, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were playing Hawthorn, but not Hawthorn, the
Wow.
Tigers. Uh, I just got got
What
got
did
onto
you
the
put
wrong
in your
foot there for a
coffee?
minute.
What did you put in your coffee? That's
No, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a Demons Tigers grand final this year. I'd be disappointed, but I
yeah.
don't know that the way Geelong have been playing, that their losses have been uh, inexplicable. Although the
Yeah.
last one with Cameron's mark that wasn't paid,
Right.
and that would have won us the game, and we'd be in a better position. But that sort of thing can happen. I mean, it happened to the Lions
Yeah.
against Geelong
Exactly.
just a couple of weeks before.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Cats won the game, but it was a win with a kick in the pants.
Right. That was,
So
it's as though the footy gods decided to even things out for them, and do
yeah,
that. So
about that.
yeah, and the thing that I have to say every time somebody brings up the Demons is that I apologize. I did not even have them in the 8 this year. I think I had them 12th because they were,
I
having
thought
watched,
after last year,
they were
they
so
they,
dysfunctional.
they yeah they played a good season last year, I thought, and they were unlucky to miss out on the 8. It came down to, as every year happens, they play their last real game, and then they've got to wait for the results of other games to find out whether they're
Mm-hmm.
going to go on into
Right. Right.
deeper into September or whether they're going to drop out. And I think that's all that. But I saw plenty. I've been following the Demons not as a second team. I don't believe in the second team. But I'd been interested in the Demons for quite a while. They got the spoon a few years back, and they're obviously had to go into a rebuilding phase. And they had, I think, 2 seasons where they'd had really poor results. They might have come 17th the following year, but they've been steadily working their way back into the competition. I thought they were unlucky to miss out on finals last year, and I think they would have done pretty well if they'd gone on. But
Yeah.
yeah, as you say, the footy gods
Yeah.
just decided that the Demons weren't going to play deep in the
Right. Right.
finals last year.
And
But
I think
this year they haven't missed a beat.
right. Max Gawn has been, to me, he's been extraordinarily impressive this year in the ruck. I mean,
Yeah, yep,
he's been phenomenal. And just
yeah.
shepherding people, and he's everywhere. It's like they cloned him, and they've got 2 or 3 Max Gawns out on the ground. So
He's playing a great season.
yeah. I there's one big subject that I know that we're going to end up talking about that we may, as you'd mentioned, you have someplace that you have to head out to, so we may be splitting this into a couple different discussions here over the next couple of days. But I had a couple questions that aren't necessarily specifically about anything that I wanted to ask you, and I've kind of been asking this type of question to several people that I've been talking to. But what were the best and worst parts, or I'm assuming that it's pretty much over now. I mean, there have been these shock lockdowns and that sort of thing, but what have been the best and the worst parts of quarantine for you?
Being able to go and watch teams locally that wouldn't have been playing locally otherwise. It's with all the clubs that were gathered in Brisbane, because this was the centre of the hub. The Lions, for instance, were playing. I went and saw the Lions play the Cats.
Yeah.
And I saw the Lions play the Pies, which I wouldn't have been able to see, because I think actually that game where the Lions and the Pies had a clash here was actually scheduled for the MCG.
Right.
Earlier in it. So there's that from a positive point of view, but there's been the drawback to it all was that a lot of teams weren't getting to play in front of their own fans,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that upsets the balance. It upsets the balance of the game, because they haven't got the impetus of the crowd behind them. I I've got to just tip my hat here at the for a moment, and go away from the players, and I've got to hand a big gold plate to the curators at the Gabba and the
Mm-hmm.
curators at Metricon, who were getting these. They'd have a game today and a game tomorrow, and they would somehow roll out an absolutely perfect pitch
Yeah.
in between.
Yeah.
They must have been working until 2 or 3 in the morning, just going around cleaning up divots and putting in patches, and they did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And big pat on the back for the curators at those 2 grounds.
That's very true, because you could have had bare dirt by the end of the season last year, with as many games as were being played there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you are a huge history buff. I know that, and that is a rabbit hole that we're going to go down. Probably not today, because as you'd said, you have an appointment you have to go to. But I have a few other questions that I want to ask you. And this is away from the Civil War, but I guess it's in a way it's a lot, maybe on the same line. Who is your most admired historical figure? Who do you most admire from history?
Um, that's a very tough question. Um, Robert E. Lee would have to be in there.
Okay.
Uh, he brought the Confederate Army to Washington twice,
Yeah.
and didn't press home the advantage. And I think he was a very fair-minded man. I've read of some. I've read two biographies, and one of them was his own historical notes from the Civil War,
Okay.
letters and correspondence and so forth. And he was very well disposed, even if he took a man prisoner, or not personally, but
Right. Right.
he tried to see that the prisoners were well looked after. Um, I don't think he's. It's hard to say. He was a Southern patriot, but I don't think his heart was ever really in it. Like deep down inside, he was doing his job.
Right. Right.
But
That's a
I
very fair statement.
I don't think his heart was in his job. So um, yeah, Robert E. Lee, uh, MacArthur.
Okay.
Um, he was a very clever general, MacArthur. Uh, Losing the Philippines wasn't very clever, but that he had circumstance. He had circumstance against him there. Um, and I've only just recently, in the last couple of weeks, read about the destruction of Manila
Mhm.
uh, during the Japanese occupation, and then further destruction that was rained on the Filipinos in the wake of MacArthur's return.
Right.
Um, Parts of Manila were just leveled. Uh, so MacArthur definitely he had an adventurous mind for a
Hmm.
general. I don't know if you've ever heard of the canoe raid on Singapore.
I have not, but I'm going to definitely look that up now. But I'm sure you're going to tell me
Uh,
a little bit about it
uh,
here.
yeah, just briefly. A group of Australian and British soldiers and sailors launched an attack on Singapore from Western Australia in an 80-foot fishing boat.
Huh. If I'm
They
not mistaken, that's
they
a bit of a
sneaked.
trip.
It is. It's an enormous trip. It was the longest penetration behind enemy lines by any surface force in World War II.
Wow.
They sailed up. They sailed up through the Straits of Bali, between Bali and Lombok, and
Hmm.
they sneaked along. They dyed themselves the same colour as the natives. They all wore sarongs. Uh, and a couple of times the Japanese came and had a close look at them, decided they were a fishing boat, and just let them go. Didn't do anything. They went to. They got to an island that was, I think, 30 miles. Kampong is 30 miles from the harbour at Singapore, and they offloaded the fishing boat. They packed up, I think it was 6 canoes, folding canoes,
Okay.
and they paddled into Singapore harbour in the dead of night, and they put limpet mines on 7 ships,
Wow.
and then sneaked away again. They got back to their island before dawn, and then the limpet mines went off, and the Japanese went absolutely nuts for days. They thought at first it was they'd bet all these ships had been torpedoed. There was a tanker that they did. It wasn't so much the damage they did; it was the psychological
Hmm.
blow
Well, it's
to
kind of
the
like
Japanese.
it's a lot like in that case, and it's kind of like the Doolittle raid when they hit back
It
at
is,
Tokyo. Yeah.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And then they managed to make a clean getaway all the way back to Australia.
Wow. Wow.
And MacArthur okayed that raid personally. Uh, there was a lot of resistance from the Australians, from the Australian Army. There was a lot of resistance from the British Navy, and they said, you know, this is just stupid. This can't happen.
Huh.
But they made it happen, and so for that reason alone, I
Yeah.
rate MacArthur right up there.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
that, that, yeah, of course, I'm a military historian. I don't get much outside uh, the uh, the military sphere. So,
yeah.
you know,
Well, let me ask you this then as a follow up. What aspects of Australian history or Australian leadership do you think Americans should know about? Because I'm going to be honest with you, as a teacher who used to teach history that teaches government now, we we as a society here in the States don't know a whole heck of a lot about things. And that's, I guess you can blame me for that, but it's, that curiosity isn't there. It's, I'm holding my phone up in front of me right now, but it's kind of like this is my world right in front of me here, but not all of the stuff that has
yes.
led to that. So what should Americans know about Australian history or Australian leadership in that regard?
Um, During the First World War, our best general was John Monash, and he virtually invented tank warfare. The tank was a new weapon, and it hadn't been used in combat the first time that Monash um, took the tank into battle. No one knew how they would perform. No one knew uh, what what the balance of power shift on the battlefield would be from the introduction of
Mm-hmm.
this new weapon. And one of the one of the American commanders was a fellow, as we spoke just recently about, was George Patton.
Mm-hmm.
He was a captain. He was a captain at the time. He was in one of the very earliest American um, brigades that went to fight in Europe during World War One, and he learned, I think, an awful lot about the tank and tank warfare from the way that Monash planned. Monash was a great planner. He was an engineer in civil life,
Okay.
so planning came naturally to him. And when he launched an offensive, it was planned down to the minute and down to the man virtually.
Wow.
Uh, he was he was a stickler for detail, and he didn't leave himself out of any discussion. If one of his subordinates wanted to do something, Monash had to know everything about it. Uh, he was probably one of the greatest Australian generals. Um, he would be the great Australian general. As I say, but Patton served under him,
Mm-hmm.
and Patton was quite happy apparently to serve under him because he learned so much about tank warfare from Monash. Um,
And see that, and I have to stop you there for just a second. And this is one of those things that even I, who have a somewhat working knowledge of these types of things, I didn't realize that the Australians were actually in Europe during the First World War. I that I, never dawned on me, but I guess there was probably that close relationship with the British that made that happen.
we fought under the English flag.
Yeah.
Australia didn't have its own flag.
Well,
Australia didn't have its own flag until I think it was the 1920s, and we
I've
all
seen
fought under the British flag.
I have seen a few people who have made the argument that they still don't and should possibly look at getting their own separate from the one that's there. But
Yeah, yeah,
that's another debate for a completely different time. But I've heard some people that have said that.
yeah,
Yes.
yes, yeah. But yeah, all Australian ships during the First World War operated with the British Navy,
Okay.
and they all flew the British ensign. Um, I think that's the reason that Australians don't want to get rid of the flag is because of that association.
Okay.
with England. Their flag takes up a quarter of ours.
Right. Right. Right.
They've got the Union Jack in the corner of the
Yeah.
Australian flag. And I think there was a big influx of British migrants after World War II, and I think there's a lot of lingering sentiment for for the old empire, particularly amongst older the older English migrants. There's a lot of fondness for the monarchy, and that's not just the English. There's a lot of Australians that are very fond of the monarchy too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's it's something we might never break free of.
Yeah.
Although Prince Charles has said that he doesn't want to be the King of Australia when his mother dies. He doesn't want to be. He wants us to be a republic.
You know,
So
can I go on the record right now?
yeah,
Why do I have this feeling that she is going to outlive him? Why
you
do I
might
have
well be
that?
right.
Why do I have that feeling that he's never going to be anything more than the Prince of Wales? And that
Um,
is in no way me making any sort of a threat or anything. I just, she has been the queen for so long. I don't.
yeah,
I think I could very easily, because he's in his 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. He's in his
You
mid
know,
seventies.
yeah,
He could
he's no
he could
spring chicken.
potentially be. Yeah, he could potentially be over 80 before he ascends the throne.
Right.
He spent
Which,
his whole life. He spent his whole life training for it, virtually,
yeah.
and I'm certain that in his own mind he thinks, well, it's my turn and I'm
Hmm.
going to be king. But you've got to bear in mind that Queen Elizabeth's mother lived to 102.
Right. Right.
They're enormously long lived. Um, we've just seen the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh,
Yeah.
and he was just shy of 100. He missed out by a couple of months.
Yeah. I just saw a
And
report today that they said that he died, that he died of old age, which, yeah, I like to joke
yeah,
and say that, he had a terminal case of being 99 is what he had.
that's exactly right.
99, it wasn't going to
That's
get better.
exactly right.
There's, they're
No,
they're
no, everyone was willing him on,
yeah, yeah.
and saying, you've only got another couple of months, hang in there. But he just had too many things wrong with him in the end.
So couple,
He was a well decorated fighter pilot.
yeah, yeah, he was very much involved in the war effort, and that's,
Yeah,
well, and then his grandson was too. Was very much involved in the military. I can't remember
yeah.
which one of the brothers it was, but I think they've actually both served in the military. Did they not?
Andrew went to the Falklands War.
Okay, no, I meant
He was a
Charles
helicopter.
Charles' sons.
Oh yeah, Harry.
Yeah,
He did 2 tours of Afghanistan,
right.
and he was in the command. He was in the commandos.
Hmm.
He was enormously active, and William uh, was a helicopter pilot for the Air Force, but he didn't serve overseas. But he was very well respected, and I think he got a medal for rescue work on a ship that was sinking. Uh,
Speaking of that,
I,
let's go back a few minutes. Did you get any kind of an award for that? Any kind of a citation for?
no, no, nothing,
Huh?
no, nothing at all.
Huh?
No, as you made mention of, it was my job.
Yeah. Well, so was the other stuff, the stuff with the prince, was his job too.
Yeah,
But as Mel
that's
Brooks as Mel Brooks said in a movie once, it's good to be the king. Uh, or almost the king.
exactly. Yeah,
Now
yeah.
I know you've got to get going here to an appointment here pretty quickly, but couple couple last questions before I let you go, and then hopefully, and I think we can probably set up a time to sit back down and continue this conversation, because I want to dig into the Civil War and just your fascination and how that became something that was of interest of you or interest to
Yeah.
you. But I've had a couple like offhanded, kind of humorous questions that I'd listed here that I wanted to ask you. Okay, this just some rapid fire ones here. Do you have any Vegemite in your kitchen?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got I've got the biggest jar of Vegemite that you can actually purchase.
Okay.
The $7 one.
Wow. Okay.
And I eat it daily. I eat it daily.
I need to get some
They're
here
probably
just to
not a
try it. Just so I can say that I've tried it. It's because there are places here where I can order it and get like a small container of it. I would just like to be able to say, yes, I tried it and maybe I liked it.
Yeah.
Or I tried it and I had to go out and get a tongue transplant, or something of that nature. We shall
It's
see.
very salty and it's very bitter.
Yeah.
But Australians are given Vegemite pretty much. It's one of their first solid foods is a piece of bread with Vegemite on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
So there are Australians that don't like it,
right.
but I don't
Well,
know of
that's
anyone
why I
who
asked the question.
wouldn't. Yeah. I don't know of anyone that wouldn't eat it.
Okay.
We can even get it in our embassies, Craig.
Well, of course you
You
should
can
be
go
able
to an
to.
Australian embassy. You can go to an Australian embassy and get a jar of Vegemite.
Oh, so you mean if I go to Washington D.C. and pick it up, I should be able to get some there? Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to give that a shot. Now, is it true? Is it true that no self-respecting Australian will be found drinking a Foster's Lager?
It is true now. I think they've even stopped making it.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't know they'd stopped making it.
Yeah, no, I think it was replaced by VB, Victoria Bitter.
Victoria Bitter, yeah.
I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not sure why it was, but I haven't seen Foster's in a pub or a bottle shop. Oh, years.
See, I didn't even know they'd stopped making
Yeah,
it
there was.
because people had said that it
If
it
they're
was
still
awful.
making it, they're not making much of it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something you'd shout your worst enemy. Here, have a beer, mate.
Did they give you such a big can of it because it was a quantity over quality type situation? This year, it's like, here, this will get you drunk.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was fairly strong. I think it was 4.6%. But
okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in years. That's
two more questions for you before we wrap up for today. Okay. Brian Taylor.
Okay, mate.
Brian Taylor. Take him or leave him?
I take him every time.
Okay, okay. Because I know some people are not a big fan of listening to his commentary. Okay.
No, I think they don't understand his humor.
Okay. Yeah,
he's very funny, and you've got to really listen to him because he's saying a lot of things out front, but there's actually an undercurrent there.
And you have to be willing to pick up on it.
He's having two conversations. Yeah, he's having two conversations at the same time. Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't like him, but yeah, I like Brian.
Now, this one is intended to be humorous here, okay? Now, I have heard differing numbers, but in your opinion, have the number of tourist deaths from drop bears actually decreased?
No.
Oh, no.
Oh, you've got to. Yeah. Particularly since the bushfires forced the drop bears into smaller areas.
Yeah.
And those areas are attracting campers.
Now I feel guilty for asking.
Yeah, the deaths from drop bears are on the rise. Not to mention the amount of chocolate that the damn things are consuming. They're all getting fat and very heavy, so that when they fall out of the trees now, they do a lot more damage. the because the drop bears, that they do two things. They fall out of the trees, they eat all your chocolate, and then they blow bubbles with your soap.
I didn't know about the chocolate and the soap part, but I well, Orville, you get to your appointment, okay? And let's see if we can set something up again for early next week to go ahead and finish this up, because this is going to end up getting released as a 2-part episode. We're not going to get through both parts of this in one episode.
Okay,
here.
Yeah, we haven't even got to Anzac Day.
Yes.
Or the significance of it.
Right.
Or it was or what happened, because before the Anzac invasion, there was a significant military defeat in the Dardanelles, and most Australians don't know about it. The British lost 8 battleships in a day, and most Australians say, well, how come we haven't heard about that? And that happened just a month before the ill-fated, as it was, attack on Gallipoli.
Gallipoli, okay.
And we haven't got into we didn't get into the history of the Anzac Day game, how it has come about.
And I definitely want to do that. Yep, I definitely want to do that.
Up until there was a period where it was not possible to hold the game because it was illegal to schedule any sporting event for Anzac Day.
Okay.
And that didn't change until 1958. But yes, we can come to that next time around.
Okay, well, fantastic. Let's wrap up this first part here for today, okay? And my guest for this first portion of this discussion has been Orville Gibson from Russell Island in Queensland. And Orville, it's great talking to you. I love sitting down talking with you. You are so very knowledgeable in so many different facets of life and that sort of thing. It really is. It's a joy to sit down and talk with you, and I really enjoy it. And I'm glad that you reached out a couple years ago when I first started following the club. I'm so thankful for that.
Craig, it's been a joy sitting here talking to you. It's just like two blokes sitting at a bar, exchanging conversation on all things. It's
I would have fallen asleep by now because I'm not much of a drinker.
All right, mate. We'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
And I'll be glad to come back. Just drop me a message.
Okay.
And I'll hook it up again. I won't leave the tape over the camera this time.
Yes, yeah. Looking at the clock, you have 4 minutes to get to your appointment.
Oh, that's all right, Craig. They'll be running late.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cheers.
No worries.
I'll talk to you soon. Yepper. Bye-bye.
Okay, mate. Bye-bye now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my discussion with Orville Gibson. Absolutely a blast to talk to him. I literally talk to him online every day. We may not speak verbally, but we definitely speak through Facebook Messenger, things of that nature, trading messages back and forth very consistently. Now, if you've got an idea for a show topic, or if you know somebody that you think would be a great guest on the show, please feel free to leave me a voicemail on the website. Shoot me a DM on Twitter, or shoot me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Remember that everything for the podcast is available at yankonthefooty.com. You can also find it on your favorite podcast provider, whether that be Apple Podcast or Spotify or Google Play, Stitcher, which is the one I generally use here in the States. I like Stitcher's setup. Works pretty well for me. And now that you've listened, I hope you'll consider giving me a review on Apple Podcasts. You can actually do that right on my website as well. You can give me a review right on the website, and then I can go ahead and share those with people on my social media and let them know what you think of the show, and hopefully we'll bring in additional listeners. And remember, you can also reach me at Yank on the footy@gmail.com, Yank_on Twitter, and if you want to help out the podcast, check out the Buy Me a Coffee page or the Redbubble page. Now, ladies and gents, I want to thank you for listening. We're fans of our clubs. Deep down, we're fans of this game that we all love. Hopefully, things are going to be getting back to normal very, very quickly for you in Victoria. I know this has been a hellish 15 months. But, with the lockdowns and footy being outside of the state for much of the 2020 season, I wish you the best. I hope things get back on track, okay, very soon. And it sounds like that might be the case, knock on wood. Now, again, I do hope again that you'll share the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, as always, may your dribble kick never hit the post. I will catch you later. This has been episode number 94 of A Yank on the Footy, part one of my talk with Orville Gibson. Don't forget, again, that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter, or to yankonthefooty@gmail.com, and everything related to the podcast at yankonthefooty.com. I do hope that you'll share the show with your friends and family. And until next time, folks, this is Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio. Goodbye.